The Canadian Armed Forces has really screwed the pooch on this one, and in my hand, I'm holding a briefing note from a ATIP request that is freaking glowing. It's so radioactive. Stay tuned to what I'm talking about and how this relates to the COVID mandates that have been imposed on the Canadian Armed Forces and what it means for you long term. Stay tuned. All right, folks, I wanted to do this episode for a while, and I've been putting it off because I have a hard time wrapping my head around the level of corruption that is going on in our own government. And I wanted to do it justice, but I think my hand has been forced to put this out because of the events and the news reports that are coming out fast and furious. And I think it's only responsible to be doing it now. Part of me during the whole COVID thing, I lost a part of myself during that. I went down a deep dark hole because going into COVID, I believe that the government had our best interests in mind. Coming out on the other side of the COVID crisis, I no longer have that belief. And that is something that has underpinned my entire life. It's why I joined the forces. It's why I went to war. I truly believed in whatever Canada represented. And unfortunately, I do not anymore. But on the bright side of that, I'm hoping that bringing things to light, exposing corruption where it needs to be exposed, and holding the standard that we once held of dignity, honor, and respect is what I'm hoping to try to convey, try to bring back as little as I can from a small audience like you that are listening. So with that being said, in order to get around the Trudeau algorithm, you definitely need to subscribe, hit the bell, and comment on this video, share it widely with your friends, because if not, I'm just going to get drowned out by the algorithm and the way that they're setting things up here in Canada. If you're just tuning in and this is your first intro to what I'm all about, my goal is to help 100,000 veterans lose 2 million pounds. Really simple. I'm devoted to ensuring a healthier veteran community. Being a veteran myself, that has been the best part of my recovery, which is literally getting healthier. And it's not just the mental health side. It's the physical side. It's lifting the weights. It's getting up early, doing the work, swinging the kettlebells, going for the swims, doing the events. That has made me significantly better and a better human being. And during the COVID crisis, I started out timid. This is not going to be so bad. It's 2 weeks. Why would the government want to go ahead and try and screw us over? Why would the government have somebody else's interests in mind? I was still naive to the fact that the best interests of its citizens are not its priority. So going into that, I did a bunch of episodes. Grade 9 biology, which I used to teach, is really straightforward. Let's go over some of the basic lessons of immunity. Let's go over the basic idea of like how viruses are spread, and let's just have a chat because it's easy to panic about things, but let's just use the scientific method here and the evidence that exists. So I did a bunch of episodes. So if we go through them all, I got episode 44, episode 65, 68, 71, 73, 81, 82, 86, 122, 129, and 144. Now, starting at episode 44, I was just talking about sheltering in place and how this is a bad idea. You're making people go on their back foot. You're not allowing them to get aggressive. You're not allowing them to be brave. You're saying, no, the only thing you can do is shelter. And this was a concept that is very antithetical to being a soldier, especially one that's deployed. You always go out and patrol. It's one of the principles of patrolling. You need to be aggressive because if not, psychologically, you start going into a bad place. Then you might get bumped. Then you might get mortared. And then all of a sudden the enemy has the advantage. And in this case, the enemy was the virus, right? Telling people, no, you can't even go outside your house. Going outside was a terrible idea. And then I started to realize people didn't really appreciate the fact that I was talking about natural immunity, which is conferred whenever you survive a virus. It's just what it is, not conspiratorial. This gaslighting of, no, you're doing it to protect your grandmother. I did not take a single to protect somebody else. When I was going to a foreign country that I could have got yellow fever, I wasn't like, oh, I'm glad I'm getting this yellow fever vaccine. Other people don't get the yellow fever. No, fuck that. I don't want to get yellow fever. Jab that shit in my arm. As I progressed, I got into episode 129 where I talked about the collapse of the calf and how this COVID stuff was starting to eviscerate morale and how leadership was being convinced to do things that was antithetical to the ethos of the military. And if you don't stick to what the ethos of the military is and its soul starts to fall apart, you end up with people leaving, or you end up with disaffected people that are in the military. Either way, it's not going to end up well. And then I eventually, in episode 144, is basically the last episode where I talked about COVID, was all about Dallas Alexander, who was on the Sean Ryan show and briefly mentioned that his last day at the Hill, at the unit, was precipitated by the fact that he didn't want to take the vax. Okay. And that was just, I couldn't believe it. And then the whole fiasco that ensued from his unit with lawyer letters to the Sean Ryan podcast was just, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But I had to now grapple with the fact that there's some kind of, you want to call it a mind virus ideology that has gripped onto people in the highest places. And the idea that you're looking out for quote unquote, your family, which is how they like to present the military, our CAF family. It's not the case. That's just a one-liner. In reality, your family, you respect each other's opinions, regardless if you agree with them or not. And you don't cast them out and try to punish them and destroy their lives because you disagree with something like a medical procedure. So this got me fired up, and I've been emotional about this for a long time. And I'm trying to get as stoic as possible with this and try to identify where the emotions come from. This episode has taken me a while because of that. And so let's get right into what is going on now, and then we'll get into what I have in my hand right now, which makes this so troubling. Okay. So the first thing that just came out was the the National Post. So I'm just going to open this up here so that I don't trip on my words. Actually, corrections, the Epoch Times. The Epoch Times, and I'm sure this is going to be in some of the mainstream media, but it's definitely not going to be on page one, just FYI. Exclusive, Canadian military's COVID vaccine mandate violated charter rights, grievance review committee finds. This, in and of itself, is a massive bombshell. Here in Canada, if you're American and you're listening to this, the Charter of Rights is the highest law of the land. It's technically one step below God. The reason why it was written that way was so that it was not given to us by men, but by a higher power. The right of the individual was enshrined in law. The only issue is that if you break these quote unquote laws, it's not punishable criminally. Okay? I'm not going to get into the whole charter, but I've learned a lot about it in the last 3 years, which I wish myself and a lot of other Canadians knew a lot more about it growing up, and especially from our school system. So one thing I respect about the Americans so much is that their Bill of Rights and the Constitution are documents you will die for. Here in Canada, ours weren't born out of blood. So we have a different perspective of them. And therefore, they were able to be trounced upon and discarded as if they didn't matter. And this is so distressing because if we are not a country that abides by the rule of law, the highest law in the land, then what are we? And just to read a little bit of this report, so a military administrative tribunal has found the Canadian Armed Forces CAF COVID-19 vaccine mandate violated the charter rights of members who refused vaccination and said the policy was arbitrary in some aspects and overly broad. I conclude that the limitation of the griever's right to liberty and security of the person by the Canadian Armed Forces vaccination policy is not in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice because the policy in some respects is arbitrary, overly broad, and disproportionate, wrote Nina Frid of the Military Grievances External Review Committee on May 30th decision. Therefore, I conclude that the griever's rights protected under Section 7 were infringed. So what this means is that he who commanded this committed a serious breach of the Charter of Rights. And it says so here. And who could that be that actually made this order that said, yes, let's go with the mandate? Well, that's the Chief of Defense Staff, General Wayne Eyre. In this document, it makes it clear. General Eyre issued an unlawful command. The remedy for this is that, as Frid says, the CAF should declare that all CDS directives surrounding COVID-19 vaccination are invalid, as well as rescind all administrative actions against members as a result of the directives. Some grievers also request apologies from the CDS for the infringement on their fundamental rights. It is left to the CDS to issue such an apology if he believes it is appropriate to do so. Okay, I guess the ball is in the CDS's court now. So the CDS is not a stupid man. And I know he knew that he was breaking the law because I have the documents right here. So therefore, he willingly broke the law to initiate a punitive action against his own troops. I cannot imagine a worse situation for the Canadian Armed Forces where the highest military officer is going after its own members based on an illegal order. How do you generate trust and ensure morale from here on out? There's more. The Privy Council, this just came out as well, issued a warning, okay? And I shouldn't say the Privy Council issued a warning. There's a secret government memo that warned COVID-19 injuries and deaths could shake public trust. What does this mean? The actual data that they had on COVID injuries was massaged and made to feel less scary so that more people would take. Now, I'm just going to read this. The memo highlighted the need for cautiously handling such incidents and employing winning communication strategies. So what this means is they knew that there were issues with the vaccine. They didn't want people to know that there was a serious risk to your health. And they also didn't want you to know the risk-reward ratio. Now, what government that has your best interests in mind would ever do that? I am not a nefarious person. I am not somebody that would want ill to befall my family or people that I love or that even people I don't know. You. I want you to be healthy. That implies that the government had some interest in making sure that you didn't have all the information. This is a psychological operation. You can use all the winning communication strategies, terminologies you want. This is essentially what we did when we were deployed to Afghanistan. You would take a story, you would ensure that it reflects what you want to do and achieve the commander's intent. You had to win the hearts and minds. Now this is being deployed against us to make decisions that are favorable for, in this case, I don't know. This is where the key bono aspect of things keeps on popping up. Why would you want to do this? They actively campaigned to ensure that you did not get all the information. Why? That's it. Why? And then let's move on to James Topp. James Topp I had on the podcast a while back. Episode was 122. James Topp is a warrant officer that basically gave the middle finger to the CAF and said, I'm not taking the shot. I'm a distinguished, decorated war veteran. I am going to fight this. And because of that, he's being court-martialed. He walked across Canada, literally, to bring awareness to this. I managed to talk to him while he was on the highway. He's being court-martialed. His court-martial date is November 6, 2023. So this isn't over. It's in New Westminster, BC. You can go online, type it into Google, you'll find it. Canadian Armed Forces court-martialed. It's public knowledge. And he's charged with 4 counts against the National Defense Act, against conduct and, the conduct unbecoming, good order and discipline, whatever bullshit that is, right? I'm going to be curious to know because he's forcing the court-martial. He's been wanting this for a while because in a court-martial, you have to show your books. You have to bring your receipts. How is the Canadian Armed Forces going to muster a prosecution in a public domain when all of this information is out? It is going to be a complete and utter embarrassment for the Canadian Armed Forces because I have a feeling how this is going to turn out. It's going to be a kangaroo court, as military courts are. They're not really based in rule of law. They're extremely biased, and their justice is not blind. Okay? So therefore, you're going to see on full display, and I encourage as many people as possible, there's a link there that you can actually participate and watch the actual proceedings because it's public unfold. Most Canadians need to be aware of this. There's a lot of people that are going up for court-martials. James Topp is one of them. And you definitely need to watch this because you need to see how this is going to unfold because it's going to tell a lot about how your government sees people that dissent. So James, we got your back, buddy, at the Hard to Kill podcast. Love to have you back on at another point. I know things are tough for you, so keep on fighting the power, man. You're a hero in my eyes. Okay, so let's get now to the big, bad briefing note. I'm biased, guys. I don't know if this is obvious or not, but it's because this angers me. This angers me, so I need to have somebody, if it's you, great, be able to look at this from an unbiased point of view. I know that's not necessarily the easiest thing. I was a former member of the military, Canadian. I have an opinion on what happened during the COVID mandate era. So therefore, when I read this, I immediately look at it from my biased point of view. So I'd love to have somebody look at this from an unbiased point of view. I guess maybe American that doesn't really have an opinion on COVID, that maybe wasn't in the military. I'm going to house this on my Patreon page. So the link to the Patreon page is going to be here in the description. And you can, with any tier of support, I'm going to put a bunch of documents there. You can read them all. So that's going to be my, if you want to call it gift to you, if you're a Patreon member. There's going to be a lot more detailed notes on this episode and everything that I've been talking about from the start. So let's get into the salient points. So there's actually 2 briefing notes here. One of the briefing notes is the one that was released to the media and reported on in 2022. I have the report here. It's in the National Post. But the one I'm talking about is actually the one that was created before August. And to put things in context, the Canadian Armed Forces and public service here in Canada instituted a COVID vaccine mandate in August of 2021. I have a briefing note here that goes back to March of 2021. There's an interesting difference. And I want to go over just some of the salient points before I go into that difference. But the salient points are here, or that the briefing note is very careful to point out that mandatory vaccination would be a human rights infringement. Next, the Canadian Armed Forces already had good uptake, upwards of like 90%. Well, we're soldiers, right? If the government says do this, we do it. It's just part of what we do. So are we surprised? No. The virus, I should say, was not really deemed to be an operational threat, meaning this was not going to be something that's going to knock out a bunch of our soldiers and make them unable to deploy. And public service was encouraged to model itself after the Canadian Armed Forces, meaning do not impose a mandate. Say, hey, we're going to just nudge you in the right direction. This is what we like you to do, but there's going to be no consequences if you don't. I'm kind of pissed at this too because I was a public servant at the time. I worked at Department of National Defense at this exact moment. I literally worked from home by myself, and the mandate came from me. And they wanted me to swear allegiance to the king. I said, that's absurd. I'm not giving you my medical data. I'm not. They said, well, I guess you're going to have to go. And that is so fundamentally wrong, man. It's so wrong that you made things contingent on a medical procedure in order to stay employed. And then lastly, the first briefing note that I'm going to talk about here, the amazing thing here was that he approved to not, and I say that again, General Eyre approved not to go ahead with the vaccine mandate. So let's look a little deeper as to what this briefing note actually says. So let's get into it. Let's open this up. This is a big, juicy document. I have to thank a fellow veteran friend on Instagram for sending this my way. Really appreciate it. And this is where the rubber hits the road, I guess. The background here, and this was developed in March, like I said. The briefing note for the CDS, the title is COVID-19 Vaccination Requirements for the CAF. And the intent of this briefing note is to provide the CDS with blended advice from medical and then redacted for the CAF to meet the strategic objectives of Reference A. I'm assuming it's medical and the other departments that exist in like Transport Canada, you name it. Don't know. The advice is guided by the best available scientific and medical evidence with consideration for force health protection operations and readiness levels. So I'm just going to skip ahead to some of the paras that are relevant. Para 4, assuming the COVID-19 vaccine intentions of the CAF population are reflective of Canadian society, upwards of 88% of CAF members may be willing to be vaccinated based on recent polling data. That said, it is important to be mindful of previous CAF vaccination campaigns, including H1N1 campaign, which yielded lower vaccine uptakes than expected. Okay, cool. So they're modeling that. I get it. Options. During the course of the analysis, the following spectrum of options have been considered. A, no formal requirement for vaccination, which is the current approach. Vaccination as a requirement for deployment. Vaccination as a requirement for all expeditionary operations. Vaccination as a requirement driven by force readiness levels, and vaccination as a requirement to meet universality of service for all CAF members. Now, I highlighted this one, Para 6, medical. The global pursuit of achieving protection from COVID-19 and of mitigating the impacts of the disease through vaccination remains in its early stages. The extent of which these vaccines protect a recipient against serious illness from COVID-19 is unknown. They knew. But what were they telling us? No, they're safe and effective. They're going to stop the transmission. Yeah, you're going to be good to go. You just need to get it. So that's funny. They knew there was unknown. Oh, but we were told that we were crazy if we said we don't know what the... Anyways. Without sufficient evidence that vaccines eliminate transmission of the virus, PHMs and quarantine protocols will continue to be required. And then Para 8. Vaccination is considered a medical intervention. It is the professional, legal, and ethical responsibility of healthcare providers to ensure that the process of informed consent is followed prior to any medical intervention. Let me say that again. It is the responsibility of healthcare providers to ensure that the process of informed consent is followed prior to any medical intervention, including the administration of a vaccine. Informed consent means that the patient must voluntarily affirm their consent, must have had the capacity to consent, and that said consent was fully informed. It should be noted that informed consent is an ongoing process, wherein an individual can elect to revoke their consent at any moment. Resuming. All right, moving on to Para 17. Options centered on mandatory vaccination of CAF members presents challenges in the public environment given ongoing litigation related to previous CAF requirements around mefloquine. Oh, what? I was talking about this. Why? Because trust had been broken years ago in Afghanistan, in Bosnia, all the places in Africa where we were deployed, and dudes got mefloquine poisoned. There's a massive class action lawsuit. So when the government and the military is like, here, take this drug troop, and you're like, wait, hold on a sec. All those guys that went crazy? How do I know that this isn't going to fuck me up? Shut the fuck up, take your medicine. I don't know about that. You said that before. I know that there's a problem with the other one. Maybe I don't want to take this one. Oh boy, did you guys shit the bed again? What a surprise. I'm glad this was in here. Options sort of required vaccination to meet universality of service may still be perceived as mandatory given perceived career consequences for those who are hesitant or resistant. Boom. There we go. It's in the briefing note. You can't say, oh, well, I didn't know. You're coercing your troops to do something that they don't want. They've already said, yeah, I give my life to king, country for the duration of my time here. I'm serving my country. Respect the service. Don't coerce them to do anything outside of serving. Giving orders is one thing. Coercing them to sacrifice their own health from something that may not provide any benefit is a very, very troubling thing. So therefore, yeah, if you had a little bit of hesitancy, you were absolutely right. And the government and the CAF knew. So moving on, there was a bunch of options that were presented, which I think were pretty interesting. The options that were presented to General Eyre, there was option A, B, and C. Where's option A? A bunch of redacted stuff. This option would benefit from a proactive COVID-19 vaccination outreach program led by the Canadian Forces Health, where CAF members would be required to attend information center sessions and afforded the opportunity to refuse vaccination in a private setting. Okay. Option B, the requirement for COVID-19 vaccination for specific tasks, locations, and or missions would be established through an evidence-based risk assessment. The focus would include domestic and expeditionary operations as well as out-of-country postings. With this option, CAF members who are not vaccinated against COVID-19 would be assessed as not meeting the requirement for a specific task, deployment, and or posting. The potential career and follow-on financial impact of these instances would increase members' willingness to accept the COVID-19 vaccine. Though this could increase members' willingness to accept the vaccine, this could be perceived as coercion on some level, or conversely, the CAF could be perceived as offering financial career incentives for those CAF members willing to accept vaccination. Yet this approach would align with current practice related to other CAF medical interventions, such as vaccination against yellow fever for operations in select locations. I mentioned yellow fever already, all right? Options C and D. This would be CAF members ordered to receive COVID-19 vaccinations based on requirement of all expeditionary or domestic operations or force readiness levels, respectively. And option E, this would see CAF members ordered to receive COVID-19 vaccinations as a requirement for universality of service. Basically, if you don't get it, you're out. So the recommendation was option B. So currently, there's no supporting evidence to suggest that there is a need for all CAF members to be vaccinated. Shocking. Therefore, implying that this is required compliance with universality of service is a bona fide occupational requirement at this time would be incorrect. Based on the limited data available on the authorized COVID-19 vaccines, it is recommended that there be no formal requirement for the vaccination of CAF members, except in prospective circumstances where a member is to be deployed. And then a bunch of different categories were outlined there. So the conclusion, in all circumstances, the CAF COVID-19 immunization campaign needs to be guided by the best scientific and medical evidence justified by clear rationale, administered in accordance with best medical practices. To the extent to which the current available vaccines protect a recipient against serious illness from COVID-19 is currently unknown. Oh man, that unknown again. But they were so sure they were safe and effective. Until more data and evidence is available that allows for the understanding of the effectiveness, reduction in infectivity, and duration of immunity for each of available vaccines, public health minister and quarantine protocols should public health ministers and quarantine protocols should continue even in a scenario with 100% CAF vaccine uptake, which that doesn't make any sense either, but at least some of the stuff in here is based in rationality. And I have the signature here. Approved or not approved by Lieutenant General ACDS Wayne Eyre. Signed 10 March 21 by him right here. Approved. Option B. Option B was the one that was approved. Okay? Option B was the one approved in March. Let that sink in for a little bit. Option B. Option B was there's no supporting evidence to suggest that there needs to be a vaccine mandate, and implying that this is required for universality of service doesn't make any sense. So let's just go with the current policy. We're doing pretty good. Let's keep on rolling. Well, that all changed in August with this briefing note. And from here, the CDS decided to go ahead and say, yeah, you know what? Everybody needs to be vaccinated. Everybody. Young, old, even if you have religious apprehensions, reasons for getting it, medical reasons, fuck you, you're getting it, or you're out. And that's, the article that's here, it's, again, top general was warned military's COVID vaccine mandate was unnecessary, possibly illegal. That's in this one too. That's in this one too. I put a little mark here just to kind of go over one of the things that kind of blew me away in this one from August. Current epidemiological modeling suggests that there lacks strong evidence to require vaccination of the remaining percentage of unvaccinated CAF members for the purpose of force health protection, as there already exists a high level of protection afforded by CAF's vaccine uptake rate. Additionally, medical ethical restrictions prevent CAF health services personnel from administering vaccines without the informed consent of the recipients. Remember what we talked about informed consent? Coercion of CAF members to accept vaccination under threat of military discipline would not constitute informed consent. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. You done fucked up, CDS. You done fucked up. And this was published October 24th, 2022. This was in the National Post, mainstream media. So this isn't news to me. I saw this. I was like, oh, what's news to me is that even in March, he was told, hey, don't go ahead with this. What changed from him to approve in March not to go ahead with a mandate to August to go ahead with a mandate that he knew was illegal? He knew it was illegal. So we always need to come back to the question, cui bono. So I'm searching, and maybe you should too. Let's fire up the ATEP request machine. What document convinced the CDS, or what meeting convinced the CDS to flip-flop? I can tell you right now, military officers, having been one, don't flip-flop. So the CDS knew this was an unlawful order, but he carried it out anyways. Now we need to find out why. What was his motivation to issue an unlawful order knowing that it was unlawful? That's where we have to get to the bottom of this. This is part of the corruption. This is part of the infiltration of terrible ideologies into the highest forms of government. I don't know what to do about this, but it needs to be exposed at some level. If you know the answer, please reach out to me. But ultimately, those of you guys that have been suffering under this draconian, totalitarian-like regime and their mandates over the last few years, the tide is turning. And thank you for holding the line and eating the shit, because now the truth is going to come to light. James Topp is going to be on court-martial. We're going to see a lot out of that. Those individuals now have in writing that it was against your human rights to be let go and released from the forces. The tide is turning, and it's all because of you guys holding the line and sticking to your principles. And I honor you for that, and I respect the shit out of you. So that's it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. There's going to be more to follow, and I really hope that this sheds a lot of light. So make sure to share this widely with your friends, especially those that are on the fence with this whole COVID-19 nonsense. We need to make sure that the truth comes out and not just surround it around left-wing, right-wing politics. It has nothing to do with that. The truth is the truth. That's not your truth. It's not my truth. It's the truth. So make sure it gets shared widely, and I hope to see you on the next one. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel, and check out my new merch store. It helps greatly with supporting the channel and keeping the lights on here so that I can produce more content and create much better episodes for you. All right, that's it for me. Train hard, fight easy. See you on the next one. Peace. I hate t-shirts that get floppy in the arms after 10 washes. So that's why I created a bunch of t-shirts with high quality cotton just for you so that you can go to the gym and look fresh, sport some philosophy, and smash those PRs looking good. So you need to head to davemorrow.net/merch, grab yourself a hat, grab yourself a t-shirt, grab yourself a sweater, and support the cause today.